told, the story of Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria. The world has condemned it as the occupied West Bank. Could it be the biblical and historical heartland of Israel? Hear the miraculous stories of true pioneers who have dedicated their lives to the restoration of this land. Discover what's being hidden by mainstream news and media. Experience extraordinary places that few people even know exist. Join us for the Joshua and Caleb Report, stories from the heartland of Israel.
Ari, I'm ecstatic to walk through the streets of Jerusalem where every single stone has a story and the history is so evident everywhere we walk. But I think, to me, as a Christian walking here, it doesn't have near the depth that it does to a Jewish person. So to me, what's the meaning of Jerusalem to you?
What's the meaning of Jerusalem to me?
That's a loaded
the
question.
better question is, what is my meaning
Yeah.
without Jerusalem? Asking what the meaning of Jerusalem is to the Jewish people is like asking what the meaning of breathing is for the human body.
Okay.
Jerusalem is the pulsating heart of the nation of Israel. It's who we are. It's never left our consciousness even for a moment. We should just start before we even go through to say it's impossible to put Jerusalem into words.
Wow.
Without being, it's like the difference between reading a sheet of musical notes and experiencing a philharmonic orchestra. You need to, Jerusalem is an experience. And Jerusalem has never left the consciousness of the Jewish people for 2,000 years. At every moment, when we build a new house, my partner Jeremy builds a house, and the first thing he does when he moves into this completed home is scrapes away a portion of the wall. So there's a bare, empty, paintless portion of the wall that Jews do around the world, because why should our house be built when God's house lies in ruins? The first thing we do after we eat, any meal, Al Naharot Bavel Sham Yashavnu Gam Bachinu Bezachreinu Etzion. On the rivers of Babylon we sat and we remembered Zion.
Right.
That's Uvenei Yerushalayim. That's the blessings after the meals. That's what it's all about. A Jewish wedding. Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini. The first thing we do right before we celebrate is break the glass because the temple is destroyed. And then the groom says, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, may my right arm lose its cunning. What does that mean? Think about that. My right arm lose its cunning. It means without Jerusalem, we don't have our strength. We're not able to accomplish anything. Jerusalem is not just a city. It's an idea. It's a mission. It's the mission of the Jewish people. And I know it sounds like abstractly philosophical and spiritual, but sometimes the most spiritual, abstractly philosophical things are really the simplest truth. Right. And that's the simplest truth of what's happening here in Jerusalem and in the world, that this is a spiritual war that we're in, and the truth of God will go to the entire world. Yeah, I'll tell you, when I think about being here in these stones of Jerusalem, when I actually allow it to internalize into my heart, I picture my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather for thousands of years. If I was able to tell them, I'm living here, I'm walking through Jerusalem, they would faint. They would not believe it's even possible. And I'm meriting to live it, to experience it, to walk through it. And that's the miracle of what Israel is. So there's a reason that God took the Jewish people out of Egypt on a circuitous route and not directly to Israel, that it took 40 years. Because it's one thing to take the Jew out of the exile. It's another thing to take the exile out of the Jew. So when we came into the land of Israel, when we conquered the Temple Mount, we clearly still had exile eyes because we passed right over the Temple Mount to the Western Wall. And we gave the keys to the Temple Mount to the Jordanian Waqf because we weren't ready yet. We weren't there, but we're approaching the Yovel, the Jubilee year, from the liberation of Jerusalem of the Temple Mount. This is a turning point where the real, true liberation that's happening isn't geographic, it's right in here. The only thing standing between the Jewish people and building the temple is right in here. The first verse in the Torah is Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. God created the heavens and the earth. Why does it start with that? Our greatest commentator says, because in the end of days, the nations are going to come against us and say, the land of Israel doesn't belong to you. And your answer should be, God of Israel created the entire world, and he gave us the land of Israel. That is our right to be here. Israel should stand up to the nations of the world and say, Jerusalem is our capital. Jerusalem is the beating heart of our nation. That's where we serve the God of Israel, who is much more powerful than all of you put together. When you look at the forces of darkness and evil and repression that are turning against the Jewish people now, even more than ever, what are they turning against? Judea, Samaria, Jerusalem. So we know these are the front lines. This is what they want to take from us. This is what we need to fortify. This is what we need to stand firm and unwavering about, even if the entire world is against us. That's what we need to do. And that consciousness that will force us to stand against the world and because we're going to be afraid, there's fear in the world, but we can decide, does that fear of man, fear of the nations, or fear of God?
So Ari, overlooking the kotel right here, what should the place of the nations and Christians be to the Western Wall today? And also, is there a place for the nations in the restored temple?
So before I can answer what the Western Wall would be for the nations, it's important first to understand what it is for the Jewish people, because the nations are simply an extension. Just like in Judaism, we have priests, they're the children of Aaron, that are in some ways the intermediaries, the facilitators of our service to God in the temple. The Jewish people are an Am Kohanim. We're a nation of priests. So what the priests are to us, we are to the entire world. So the Jewish people, let me try to explain what the Western Wall is like. It's like, imagine a father that gets so angry with his son that he says, leave, I never want to see you again, go. And the son leaves. But then he just waits a second and he goes back and puts his ear to the wall and he hears his father crying. When we put our ear to the Western Wall, we hear God crying. That's why it's called the Wailing Wall, because of all the tears. Because this place is the conduit for all prayers. When Jacob was here on Mount Moriah, when he was here, he said, Ki im beit Elohim ze shara shamayim. This is the house of God. This is the gateway to heaven. Yerushalayim it ends in ayim. And only a word ends in ayim in Hebrew and it has an equal and exact opposite. And why does Yerushalayim have an equal and exact opposite? There's Yerushalayim shel mala and Yerushalayim shel mata. Jerusalem the spiritual and Jerusalem the physical. The two worlds come together. So when we put our hand on that wall, we're actually able to encounter the world. We can feel the tears of all of humanity because they've gone through this place right up to God. We've been speaking this whole trip as we're walking, that the redemption is really about a consciousness, an awareness. And what is that awareness? Prophet Isaiah says it, Habakkuk says it. He says, until the knowledge of God covers the earth as water covers the sea. It's like this story of two fish in a fish tank and one says to the other, I don't know, do you believe in water? Because we're so immersed in godliness, sometimes it's hard to see it right before us. And that's what the Temple Mount represents. That knowledge that God will push from our heads into our hearts, it will permeate all of existence to the degree where we'll be able to take this gun right here and beat it into a plowshare. There will be no need for hatred or violence. There will be no need for jealousy or sadness or grief. That's what this is all about. That's what the Temple Mount is about. It's universal. It's about bringing God to the world. The prophet Zechariah said, V'nilvu goyim rabim al Hashem b'yomahu, and the righteous of the nations will attach themselves to the house of Israel on that day. And in this day when the whole world is against us, for all of those around the world who are standing with us, who are literally being a comfort to us, that we're not alone. For those of you who are doing that, you're attaching yourself to the house of Israel, and I want to invite all of you, implore you, please come to Jerusalem. Come and experience it, because we don't only consider you our friends, we consider you our family. And when we're praying for that temple to be rebuilt, we're praying for you to be right there by our sides.
I think in summing everything that we feel, it's Imesh Chachek, Yerushalayim, Tishchak Yemini. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. That's what you believe, that's what I believe, and I think together we can make a difference in the world and in this city. Amen?
Amen.
Amen.
Amen.